One of the most important things about the D&D multiverse and its mythology is not necessarily the how things work, but rather why. And that's what Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes really delves into.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically building the mythology of D&D. We're going back and saying, why are things the way they are? And I use mythology very specifically. We think of these things as the foundational building blocks of the D&D cosmos. Why do dwarves act the way they act, right? That's what the question we're asking. And then we're then taking that and saying, given what we know about dwarves, if they act this way and now we know why they act this way, what does this say about how they might act in the future? So it's all about giving you as a dungeon master a framework within which you can work and both lay out, well, here's the past of my campaign, but then here's how I think my campaign might go. I know that dwarves are essentially homebodies. They don't like to leave their fortresses. They like stability. They like reliability. So now when I'm portraying a dwarf, if I have these big truths in mind, I can make up any dwarf I want. But what is hopefully interesting is you then contrast that dwarf to dwarf culture. If I have a dwarf who's chaotic neutral, how did they end up that way? What does it mean in this character's relationship to other dwarves? And what does it mean for how they might act in the future? If I have a lawful evil elf, what does that mean? And instead of saying, here's all these very specific points, dwarves have 6 toes, and dwarves always put their beards in braids that look like this, we focus a lot instead on giving you the bigger, more far-reaching truths, like dwarves like stability. Because I think my hope is, as a dungeon master or a writer or whomever's working on the game, you can take that truism and think about how it affects a specific character. So we don't want to tell you what each specific dwarf is like. We want to tell you in the generalities of dwarves, backed up with mythology that says, here's their mythology, and that explains why they are this way. Because D&D is a mythic universe, right? The gods exist, they're there. You can meet the person who made all the dwarves. Morden exists, right? So mythology is incredibly important, and it's very vivid. It's basically, D&D doesn't have history, it has mythology. And then once you know that, you have a framework which a lens you can use to understand things, and then start changing it, right? You can make now, I know what dwarves are in general, now I'm gonna make a specific dwarf with that knowledge, and then I can play a contrast, I can lean into that, I can do one tweak, things like that. So one of the things that falls out of this, is dwarves really like toil. They like to work. They generally enjoy working. You can imagine a red dragon somehow taking over a dwarf stronghold, and the dwarves actually growing to like the dragon. What if the dragon gave them security and gave them purpose and said, sure, you can obey all your customs. You can imagine a very clever dragon doing this. Just think of me as the king of this clan now. And I will now owe you everything that a king owes to you, but you will owe me everything that is owed to the king in turn. And you can imagine dwarves who happily serve a dragon. The dragon protects them. It keeps their enemies away, so now they have stability. The dragon's very smart. The dragon makes good decisions, right? The clan is prospering. Well, what does that look like in your world? You've made something which might be really interesting to play with in your campaign, and then you can see why it's this kind of warped arc of dwarves, but you can see how it fits in. Right? You can imagine in a human kingdom, the elf character, the elves who live next door to a human kingdom might support like the Robin Hood-esque figure who's trying to lead an insurrection against the king. Because the elves just believe, no, everyone should be free and happy, right? Why would you need this king who's collecting taxes? That's just wrong, right? And then the elves end up in a war with the human kingdom over that, right? You're supporting the insurrection, right? Well, of course they would. That's just elves. And even within that elven society, some elves might say we should help these humans. Other elves like, no, we shouldn't. And then you start seeing that friction evolve. It's all about building mythology that asks more questions than it provides answers. The only guideline we have is we will tell you about the mythic past. We will try to do it in a voice that isn't judgmental. There's actually someone online got kind of fussy about it, like the Mind Flayer entry in Volos. This is D&D saying Mind Flayers are the good guy. Like, no, we're not saying anything. We don't say there are good guys or bad guys. We'll throw an alignment on people, say lawful good, lawful evil. But we try not to be judgmental, because we tell you the mythic past, but the future is yours to write. So that's why we try to do things like, rather than say dwarves are good, they love puppies and they help old ladies across because they're good, we say, no. Dwarves are lawful good. Dwarves are nice to each other, and they are nice in general to the world. But really what they like is stability. That's what they want. So that's how you end up with a dwarf clan ruled by a dragon, because they like stability, and the dragon's offering stability. And that to me is why why do they like stability? And then you then trace it back. Here's the mythology. Here's the mythic foundation of dwarves in their society. And that's, I think, a big change for D&D. And it was really funny. I never thought of it this way until we started doing a lot of research. D&D used to have this very scientific approach to world building. You'd ask, how do things work, right? How does this work? How does a dragon fly? Physically, how does that happen? How does a dragon's breath weapon work? What glands does it have in its organs? And now we ask, why? Why do dragons fly? Why don't they just crawl or burrow? Why do dwarves live in mountains by themselves? Why haven't the elves just taken over every world of D&D? They live the longest, the eldest, they have powerful magic. So we ask a lot of why. And then invariably it's because here's the myth, here's what happened. And that's what set these people in a course. So rather than look at biology, we look at culture, right? There's a thing of like, orcs act the way they are because, well, that's the culture, because there's a god Groomch who literally lives in the outer planes who tells them what to do, and he has a plan, right? And then lurking behind Groomch is Luthic, who she has a smarter plan, right? But that if you took an orc and raised it in human society, it would just be like a human, right? I mean, obviously it would be an orc biologically, but it would just, there's no reason why an orc couldn't be raised by, but in an orc society and be like a dwarf, and I just like toil and I like work, and this is what I was taught, right? Because then you're talking about something which is much more morphable, right? If you just say dwarves are capital G good no matter what, oh, these dwarves are ruled by a dragon. Oh, it must be a silver dragon, right? Like, no, it's a blue dragon. Well, how does that work? That's impossible, right? No, but instead you focus on that mythic layer, you focus on cultures and societies and asking lots of questions. I like to think we ask a lot of questions and we provide just enough of the answers that you can answer the rest of the questions yourself.
Thank you, Mike Merles, for being on the show. Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes is available right now for pre-order on dndbeyond.com by clicking on the link in this video description. D&D Beyond is the official digital toolset for D&D. I'm Todd Kenrick. Thank you for watching.